So it started off as just a collection of clips of films I've seen in the past that I've seen that seemed important, but gradually as I did it, it got a little bit more edited, so it's a bit more weird. And it just, I kind of kept it quite simple, so it's not, it's just editing, so it just sort of cuts and starts, doesn't overlay or do any cleverness. Like, it's just quite like standard Hollywood filmmaking.
But you had that quote.
Oh yeah, but there's a quote. So it's a quote from Fernando Pessoa. I want the glass to be perfectly clear so that it will in no way hinder my examination of what is behind it, but I always want the glass.
Travis.
If you turn the light off in there, will you be able to see me?
I don't know. I never tried.
Can you see me?
Yeah.
Do you recognize me?
Oh, Travis.
Double glazing consists of two panes of glass separated at the edges by a spacer bar. Separated at the edges The edges are then completely sealed to produce the double glazed unit. The edges are then completely sealed to produce the double glazed unit. By a spacer bar. The airspace or cavity becomes a thermal barrier, which reduces heat loss. separated at the edges by a spacer bar. Glass is a poor insulator. Glass is a poor insulator, which is why a single pane of glass allows heat to pass through it with ease. Air is a good insulator, which is why double-glazed units significantly reduce heat loss. Completely sealed, separated at the edges, completely sealed by a spacer bar.
Oh, Travis.
I guess there's a danger of like trying to explain it, but
What, yeah, no, don't explain. What were you trying to find out, and did you find it out? Or Was it just a
Um,
bit of serious play?
Probably mostly serious play, but then putting together just these clips that I've always thought
Mm.
of, like how they might go together,
Yeah.
and they started to find an order as you do it, and so and you start to see recurring themes in your own ideas.
Mm.
And I mean, I had never actually thought about like. Well, it never occurred to me that what I was interested in also related to the screen. So as soon as I started working on it, that obviously cropped up as an idea.
Mm.
And I guess in the case of the birds, for example, like there's the whole theme of that movie is the idea of nature gone wild
Mm.
or gone berserk, and a need to control it and keep it out. And then I guess there are all sorts of things about what. And I call it double glazing because I am very interested in what double glazing has done to the window, and that basically it's not just that you've added another layer of glass. It's like at completely the opposite of single glazing. It's not actually, it doesn't do the same things. So single glazing, is the temperature of the outside. So it brings the outside inside to some extent at the same time as kind of keeping the separation. There's also, because the single pane of glass has two surfaces, there is a double reflection, but they're so close you don't see it. But when you have a double sheet of glass, you have two reflections. So you see this kind of space in the reflection that is also in.
Yeah,
those are things that I'm thinking.
What was I think my favourite clip was the shot of the train with the distortion with the glass
The ripple,
being not pure as what our industry achieves today. That was at that time it was the height of the technology that they couldn't achieve, and then you had that after that the byproduct essentially that I think is interesting. But today we can't get that after effect in a way. Today we're trying to almost mimic the reality too much.
But actually, though, one of the things that's happened is that at that time they actually could make, or at least around the time the Farnsworth House was built, they could make like perfectly flat glass. And in fact now we can't because of code. So in fact, if you look at the glass, that you see, because of having to have it a certain kind of tempering now for in case of it smashes in a fire.
Yeah.
So in fact, if you look at almost all contemporary glazing in office buildings, it's wobbly. Not in the nice way that it used to be.
Yeah.
In a big kind of, it looks like plastic, but it's like plastic sheets. So actually we've lost that quality of perfect plate glass.
Yeah.
You just can't make it anymore. There are very few places that still produce it.
Actually, I'm working on a church building in San Francisco now where they were converting the church into an office. So an interior designer is moving in and making it his atelier, and they wanted a lot of the glass, the old glass was actually ribbed, and they couldn't replicate that or it would be too expensive, so they wanted to make it clear glass. And then we had a huge fight with the preservation, with the State Historic Preservation Office about it, because they were like, that destroys their integrity. But then we found ourselves, even though we're conservation architects, sort of being on the side of the designer saying it's cost prohibitive for our client to try and replicate this glass. So the compromise was that we kept it in the upper windows where there was enough salvage glass to sort of do a consistent row of windows on the upper levels, but at ground level where there were office workers on the mezzanine, they wanted to look out onto the landscape. So then we just did clear glass for them, and it has a UV coating. So honestly, for me, it does look really different and quite kind of a shame.
I guess one of the other things that I was trying to think about, or at least I've been thinking about through these clips that also I play in my head, as it were, because a lot of these films I saw a long time ago, not all of them, but is that glass, I think now, even more than it used to be, is treated simply as something to look through rather than as a material. So that it's sort of its material qualities become most manifest when it smashes, and so that's why I guess the
Blade
film
Runner.
the film progresses from like solid glass to glass being smashed to pieces. There's something if you think about like in a way it's like this thing about the glass used to be wobbly. It had a presence as a kind of material in between that you could see the glass, and also just the way it was detailed with thin steel mullions meant that you had this kind of dragonfly wing quality. It had a kind of fragile skin-like quality. And now, as soon as you have these massive plates of glass with like glass fins supporting them, it becomes kind of flaccid. Actually, it actually loses the kind of brittle quality that glass can have. So it actually loses its. It just becomes an attempt to not be there. Which
Well,
actually,
it does try not to be there, doesn't
Tries
it?
not to
It
be.
can't not to be there.
yeah. Whereas I guess.
But isn't that one of the sort of modernist, what would you, I don't know whether it's a dream or not, that ideally there is nothing between you and the outside.
Well, exactly.
There is a curtain of air at the worst, which of course you'd probably see anyway, couldn't you? That would probably shiver.
Yeah.
But that's where isn't that where it comes from?
Well,
But I think you're right about glass. I suppose that Colin Rowe essay says it all, really, doesn't it? It's actually not transparent. We think
Yes.
it is, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's much more complicated than that.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
And I think someone like Mies, for example, basically I think about all the stuff in relation to Mies most of the time, but someone like Mies I think is misrepresented as being in the school of wanting nothing between you and
Oh,
the
really?
world.
Yeah.
But I actually think if you look at his montages and his collages,
Mm.
the way in which he puts in a landscape view is exactly the same way as in which he would put in like a tapestry or something.
Mm.
So in other words, actually, there's a way in which like it's opaque. It's bringing everything onto a surface, and then you feel that surface. So when you go into the Farnsworth house, you actually have less impression of looking through the glass than of the glass's presence as a kind of tense surface there that you're in front of. So it's actually almost the opposite of looking through it. It becomes strangely kind of present.
You need to look at maybe enter the void. You know, at the beginning where the guy flies over the city, and you're sort of looking down. It's just by the point of view, sort of everything's flattened.
Is that odd film?
That odd.
That's the Book of the Dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trippy film.
Maybe just the point of view is more important there sometimes than the actual material.
What was the film where the faces merged? I didn't know that film.
That's Paris, Texas.
Where is it?
Yeah, I mean, like to me, that's one of the scenes that is most like brilliant, and also is most to do with what I'm thinking about, because I think it's very.
recognise the man at all.
I guess he's-
He just died recently.
Mm.
Oh, has he?
Yeah, he died about a few months ago, I think.
I think it's somehow very important that glass is put into a wall made of insulation.
Mm.
So there's something there about insulation. Like, I guess there's something about the way in which we build now is more and more layered, and the wall is becoming more and more thick, more and more doubled. And there's more and more between us and the world. And so that's more than just a practical issue, I guess. Maybe.
Do they not say that double glazing as well as whatever you're talking about vision, that air-wise as well, it's really mucked up housing, isn't it? That
Yes.
like people.
Yeah, no. This
getting
is the
conditions.
whole idea is that you completely seal off the outside
Yeah.
world. That's the new kind of idea of environmentalism, which is just balmy. I mean, it means that. Yeah, exactly. It's a fucked up environment.
I know they've tried that, haven't they? There's very, very zero energy
Passive
houses.
Passive in
And
all
all
ways.
this,
yeah.
people finish up having to leave the door open because it gets so,
Exactly.
the air gets so bad inside. But what do they put in the cavities? Some sort of
Argon.
gas, isn't it?
It's
Argon.
Yeah, okay.
Mm.
Really?
So it's complete.
And they don't last that
It's
long.
as
double
the narrator said. It's
Oh, of
completely
course, I
sealed.
wasn't paying attention. It's just that in this Slade, because we were up there today, when I first started to study there, in the Slade on one of the walls, there's a plaque, and it says, "On this spot, argon was discovered."
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah, they've got all these little plaques around the building where it must have been
Where things were discovered.
where things were discovered or noted for the first time. And argon was the first one out of the building.
In the corner was discovered.
Yeah, well, again, glass has this double character.
Yeah.
It's transparent and also reflective, so it both keeps you out and lets you in, and it's endlessly kind of doubling. I guess that's one of the.
It's sad now though, the minimum reflectiveness you need for glass is really high, just in terms of kind of bouncing back solar stuff. So yeah, I mean you can't even really specify a nice transparent glass.
Yeah.
I think it's the second film which shows that property of how it depends on the distance where you are from the glass, that the perspective changes, whether it's reflective or see-through, and like how it's controlled by light and
your angle to it.
The angles that kind of shows double glazing quite well. The second one.
Have you heard that thing that scientifically glass at room temperature is a liquid?
It's yeah.
That after kind of thousands of years, at the bottom of the paint will be kind of a tiny bit of a millimetre thicker than the top.
Yeah. Viscous.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, I think so. I haven't read into it a
I
lot,
think
but
it is true. Yeah, and the same with asphalt. All the roads are gradually glooping out a bit.
Have you looked at transparent screens?
How do you mean?
OLEDs. There's a technology where you literally now it's a screen that has graphic content displayed on it, and you can see behind it.
No.
It's concept phones, I think, but they brought out Apple brought out a concept phone where it's just you have a screen but you can see through. So if it's in your hand, you can see your hand through it, but it's still a screen. I think is that what you're talking about?
Yes. The OLED Samsung they brought out the product, but you can just Google transparent screen. Go get LCDs and OLEDs.
Yeah, I guess buildings will probably have that soon, won't
they? Already Coca-Cola has a
glass sample in your hand.
They use it for fridges and like distributors, where you can order what beer you want, and it's overlaid with the beer behind it that falls in front of you. You can Google that.
Yeah, well. Not more depressing.
Yes. I thought I wanted an interconnected world till I discovered Instagram.
Blew up.
Those words like "you're being followed by."
Just on a note of low tech, Pepper's Ghost of the theatre thing, and it's just such a magical thing.
Yeah.
Pepper's Ghost is, but when they used to try and get a ghost on stage in theatre, you basically put a big sheet of glass on the stage, and you get the character to go into the orchestra pit, and you throw loads of light onto them, and they end up on the stage. Yeah. And it's such a magical thing, and it started making me think about that. We did one when we were at the Bloomsbury Theatre, where we got someone who was sitting in the dressing rooms and bounced them off 5 mirrors with lots of light, and got the last mirror to the front of the stage, and then put lots of light on that, and somehow this person ended up on the stage floating, and it took about 2 hours. So there was some people were sitting in the audience a bit like here, and then after 2 hours, just everybody went, because it was like this weird vision just appeared on the stage. It was really freaky. It was like a Renaissance painting, and it was floating like it was Sputnik or something. It was an incredible thing. But yeah, glass on stage is something else to capture things.
Actually, that kind of reminds me of a dressing room design these days. So in these boutique stores, when it's on women's clothes, they're starting to design the lighting in such a way that it looks like when you put on the garment and you look in the mirror, they're trying to give you the impression of sort of like hovering in space. So the way that they design the lighting and the arrangement of the mirrors is sort of meant to create this sort of seamless view, and then they're trying to augment it with all the
so you don't kind of see the door of the cubicle.
Yeah.
You see yourself
Yeah, they're trying to create this sort of almost like digital sort of immersive experience within the dressing room. And then eventually they want you to just sort of stand there and just like swipe through different outfits and communicate with the brand or whatever.
But it's funny, we were talking before anybody came, you were deploring the fact that students now, they tend to search Pinterest for images in order to...
Makes me sound like a teacher.
To start a project, trawling through images. But aren't you doing the same thing, but you're just doing it with movies rather than...
Yeah.
So what are you going to do next?
I guess there are...
When you get your client...
There are ways of doing it well. Maybe less well, good ways. I guess, but there is like, you can trawl through images but there's a difference, I guess, between sort of like, it's the way in which you put the images together. It's also maybe quite personal.
No, I appreciate a lot that it's not just YouTube hacks.
Exactly, because this is sort of stuff that I've built up over 10 years of like noting down a clip, thinking that's sort of gradually built. And I guess like this thing about images, because I was also talking to you about this architect who chose 51 images, so he did the same thing, but he was specific about them, and he chose them.
But I didn't know what was his name.
Olgiati. There's a very clear reason for each one.